not only a student, but responding related to systematic racism and biases within institutions, and how that often marginalizes other minorities within those institutions. My good friend Bonnie here, I was just telling you today that there are times minorities we feel afraid to speak for things that have happened, and I'm certainly I feel that way, afraid to speak up because of what happened last year. And the response, not particularly helpful in really addressing the matter of the issue. And so, as a result of that, I've worked with the Partnership for Community and Diversity. Is that right? Yeah. So the PCD at the Edmond School is a student-run group, and they've been a great support in trying to get this panel discussion moving to really address some of the larger issues around marginalization, really, of minorities within institutions. And so I've got some good colleagues and good friends who have given up their time, and I'm very thankful to them. And I express my gratitude to you for doing this, who have more expertise than I do and have more wisdom than I do on these issues. And so we'll start off with Bonnie, who will really lay a broad foundation of racism, and we'll then tie that into the other presenters. So,
just got handouts.
Yeah, handouts.
Yeah.
An associate professor in the School of Public Health, which is another professional school. This is a professional school. The School of Public Health is a professional school. I'm also director of the Center for Indigenous Health Research and the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute. And I think actually I came to UW at the same time Maura and I did. And I want to tell you, just say something about him. This is a very important person right here. This guy is helping rewrite the legislation for the entire Navajo Nation government. I don't know if you guys knew that. I'm gonna start crying. This, what he does for his tribe, his tribe doesn't care whether he has a PhD from Evans School. He's already an important leader in his community. He was a founder of the Center for the Navajo Policy Center at the nation as well. So, and he has chosen to pick up the skills of this institution, and I just really want to commend him. He's a wonderful example to the rest of our both Native Indigenous students and Indigenous faculty. Just how he puts himself out there and really exposes himself to the type of cultural denigration that he has been exposed to. And I really do believe my little brother here is a little bit traumatized. And I just want to acknowledge that he has, this is his response. He's doing within this institutional appropriate response to what happened to him. And I hope, I'm sure he's got incredible resources for other types of healing. And I just want to say that, I'm sure you've taken advantage of that. And I want to talk about something today that's related to decision making, and that's microaggressions and marginalization. How many of you have heard of microaggressions? Well, I bet you by the time I finish, all of you will be able to cite instances of microaggressions against yourself, because I can tell this is predominantly an audience of color or other marginalized groups. And allies, and the allies who are here today, thank you for coming. It's really important to have white allies and, particularly white women allies, in this struggle, so thanks for coming. And Dan Hart, of course, the faculty that are here, more allies. So what is a microaggression? Microaggression is a commonplace verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignity, whether unintentional or intentional, which communicates hostility, derogatory or negative slights and insults to people from marginalized groups. It's really based on the work of the Sioux brothers, who are psychologists. I don't know if you guys are familiar with their work, but it's really excellent stuff. And if you Google microaggressions and Sioux, you probably have access to all their stuff. Microaggressions can be a microassault, which can be conscious, a conscious biased belief or attitude held by individuals and intentionally expressed overtly or covertly towards marginalized groups. And then it's intended to hurt the victim through name calling, avoidant behavior, or purposeful discriminatory actions. And, I don't know if the incident that happened within the Evans School was conscious or unconscious, but it seemed like people knew what they were doing when they were, when they were making decisions about that incident. And there can also be micro insults, interpersonal interaction, verbal or nonverbal, or environmental cues that convey rudeness and sensitivity that demean a person's identity or heritage. And then there's micro invalidation, often unconscious, interpersonal comments or behaviors and environmental cues that exclude, negate, or nullify the psychological thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and experiences of a particular target group. And they directly attack, on the other hand, they can also directly attack or deny the experiential realities of socially devalued groups. And I just want to tell you, I was at our annual conference, the American Public Health Association meeting 2 weeks ago. And the reason why I'm kind of have microaggressions on the forefront of my mind is I was walking around for the 4 days I was there with my primary research partner. Her name is Nina Wallerstein. And she's a very big researcher. She's published a lot on empowerment theory, published a lot about community-based participatory research. And, I would say that, at least more than half of all her work on CBPR, I'm the co-author on it. So we were walking around APHA, and it was numerous times people would run up to her and say, "Oh, Nina, Nina, Nina," and wouldn't even acknowledge that I was standing there with her. And every time every time that happened, I turned to her and I said, "Did you see that?" She goes, "Yeah, I saw that." So she actually acknowledged it was a conscious little game we were playing about how many micro insults and micro invalidations I was going to get on the 4 days of this conference. Actually, at one point there was a...
That's why I don't go to AAA anymore.
It is just, it's hurtful.
Of course.
And in most situations you wouldn't notice it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an effect on you. In public health, one of our biggest outstanding questions in public health is, why do communities of color have so much, why do we die sooner? Why do we have more chronic disease? Why do we have more mental health issues? And people, all of our epidemiology has shown that maybe 45% of the variance of why communities of color get sick is due to poverty and all the things that go with poverty. But 55% of why communities of color have worse health is not explained by anything that they can find right now. And I really do believe that microaggressions is one of the reasons. It really attacks, something called an allostatic load, a stress load that we have in our systems, and it just builds up and builds up and builds up, and we don't even realize it over time. But these microaggressions are absolutely just chipping away at our security and our wellness. I really believe that's how it happens. But so some common themes of microaggressions are things like being treated like a second-class citizen, assuming normality of dominant cultural identity, or normality of heterosexism. I think that's a very totally, big one. I am, guilty of a lot of these things. That's the other thing. It's not, if you're a person of color, it doesn't mean that we are saved from all of these, this atrocious behavior. We've been socialized in this culture as much as anybody else has. And even though, we get impacted by it, it's really up to us to examine our own motivations and our own actions, to be really mindful of how these microaggressions really play out in our own behavior. It's really important to do that. So assuming normality of dominant cultural identity, assuming inferiority or pathology of marginalized identity, denying personal bias, totally agreeing in the myth of meritocracy, ascription of intelligence, cultural blindness, using offensive biased language, and assuming criminality. And I just want us to take a little look on this handout that Maura and I was so obliging to so I'm just going to read a few of them, and I would like to have us all have feedback. Probably a really big one is when people feel like you're an alien in your own land. When Asian Americans and Latino Americans are assumed to be foreign. The microaggression, the statement might be something like, "Oh, where are you from? Where are you born? You speak good English. Or a person asking an Asian American to teach them words in their native language. Hasn't that ever happened to anybody? Has that happened to you? You want to say a little about it?
Well, I grew up in Alabama, so it's unique in Alabama.
Did people always ask you, where are you from?
Yeah,
What's your nationality?
Names into Chinese, yeah.
Oh my gosh. How did that, at the time, did you feel like it had an impact on you, or was it just something that
At
made
the time,
you
it made me
unique?
feel special.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then I think, as I got older, as
It's a microaggression, huh? It feels like a microaggression. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So, ascription of intelligence, assuming intelligence to a person of color based on their race. Oh my gosh. You are a credit to your race, you are so articulate. And this, I guess because
Who
this...
recently said that about Obama? Someone recently said that.
They have been saying it the whole time. He's so
Recently,
articulate.
that Obama's so articulate.
Right.
People don't realize how passive aggressive that is.
That's incredibly tough. Well, some of it isn't even so passive aggressive. You've seen the editorial cartoons with the monkey. It's really just egregious. There's microaggressions and then there's full-blown big aggressions. So, so the microaggression under ascription of race, is that whole articulate thing. But the message underlying that are people of color are generally not as intelligent as whites, and it's unusual for someone of your race to be so intelligent. The other thing is that I'm sure we've all experienced is, we'll be in a group and we might be one of a very few people of color in a group, and people will want us to speak for our entire ethnicity. Like, you tell me, what do all Native Indigenous people think about A, B, C, or D? And it's just, anybody have an experience of that? Has anybody ever experienced that? Being really picked on to, give the alternative perspective if you're in a classroom or something?
Well, for me, several times it's come in the form of, well, your people do this and that. What do you think? What would you say about who you are? And that's a very common way of introducing that microaggression is, your people do it this way. And
Right.
you're one of those people, so do you really do it that way? And do you think that's correct, or should you change?
Right.
Is the implied message that something's wrong with the way your people are doing it, so you should, as the representative of, or an articulate representative of your people,
Right.
you might be able to make an argument for or against that.
Right, yeah, you've learned our language, so you need to be the bridge to translate to us
Yes.
what your people want.
Really want, yeah.
Yeah. And the probably one of the most hurtful issues of that is people every day, and just assuming, because they can guess at your ethnicity, they think that they know a lot about you. And when they guess at your ethnicity, they know one thing about you. That's all they know. And they ascribe all of these other things like criminality and lack of intelligence and social class and values and everything else. It's, and we talk about it very scientifically here, but it is really a very emotionally hurtful thing to be exposed to that on an ongoing basis.
Oh, don't you think an interesting part of this, though, is something that's not up there, that a deficit for us becomes an asset to them. Like, it's considered a deficit if I'm a Spanish speaker learning English, I need remedial education. But if I'm a white person and I speak English and I want to learn Spanish, it's considered enrichment. An asset rather than a deficit. So that's the game of making your qualities into a deficit, while for the dominant group, that same quality is actually a deficit.
Right, yeah, and I think that I noticed that, or we have discussed that particularly, for example, in colonial America, where you had, the scouts who would interpret, who were considered, not very smart as a white person, but who was the bilingual person in the room? They were probably, going back between two cultures and knew enough to live in both cultures, so they were really the most sophisticated people there. And that's not how they were depicted in colonial text at all. So some other examples, criminality, white men or women clutching their purse or checking their wallet as a black or Latino approaches or passes. I don't know if it's just white people that do that. I think
But it's